Good evening. Welcome to the June 26, 2024 Northampton School Committee special meeting. I'm Jean Louise Scherer, the chair of the school committee, and I'll be presiding this evening. This meeting is being held remotely on Zoom pursuant to the modification of the state's open meeting law for the pandemic. This meeting and all participating will be audio and video recorded. I'll begin by asking Cassie to please call the roll of the school committee.
Certainly. Mayor Scherer.
Present.
Member Gacy. Member Foster Cannon.
Here.
Member Seraphy Cox.
Present.
Member Stein.
Present.
Member Hennessy.
Present.
Member Miller.
Was she expected to be here? Does anyone know?
No, she's in Montana without connection. Member LaBounty.
Oh.
Member Agna.
Present.
Member Davis.
Present.
Great. Okay. So this is a special meeting, so there is no public comment, and we are going to be moving into executive session right at the beginning of this meeting. And we will be adjourning the executive session and then coming back into an open session for the remainder of the meeting. So if people want to stick around, we will come back into open session. And would somebody like to make a motion to enter executive session? Go ahead. Everyone should be able to unmute. Is that correct?
Yeah. So I make a motion to move into executive session to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining or litigation if open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining or litigating position of the public body, and the chair so declares, and to discuss the reputation, character, physical condition, or mental health rather than professional competence of an individual, or to discuss the discipline or dismissal of, or complaints or charges brought against a public officer, employee, staff member, or individual. The individual to be discussed in this executive session shall be notified in writing by the public body at least 48 hours prior to the proposed executive session, provided, however, that notification may be waived upon written agreement of the parties.
Okay.
I'll second that.
Motion's made by member Agnes, seconded by member Davis. Roll call, please, Cassie, on entering executive session.
Member Foster Cannon.
Yes.
Member Seraphy Cox.
Yes.
Member Stein.
Yes.
Member Hennessy.
Yes.
Member LaBounty.
Yes.
Member Agna.
Yes.
Member Davis.
Yes.
Okay, so we'll again be entering executive session. We will come back into open session, and I'm going to start moving school committee members into a breakout room, and the two NACE members who are on the agenda as well.
Excuse me, Mayor. Sorry. Excuse me, Mayor.
Yes,
Also, my attorney is also with us. So Kelly Gonzalez, please make sure that you move her into the waiting room.
Kelly Gonzalez, thank you. Okay, appreciate that. Okay, let's Stein is here, just is unable to, doesn't have a camera, so is hard to find, but should be a co-host as well.
He's
on
the last page of my grid.
Okay. All right, well, let's keep an eye out for being able to see him if he's not gonna show up on the front page. Okay,
Sorry.
no, that's okay. Just trying to keep everyone on in view. Okay, we are back from executive session, and the school committee has a statement that I'm going to read, and then we're going to take a vote on in response to the vote of no confidence. So on Wednesday, June 12th, the Northampton Association of School Employees, NACE, voted no confidence in our district superintendent, Dr. Portia Bonner. As a school committee, we have heard the concerns of NACE and are responding to affirm our commitment to support Dr. Bonner and to work with our larger school community to chart a path forward for our district. Dr. Bonner was hired with high hopes and community support during a turbulent time in Northampton Public Schools. She is the third superintendent in as many years and has not finished her first year or been evaluated by the committee. We remain committed to Dr. Bonner's success. At the same time, we acknowledge there has been a fracture in trust within the school community, and reestablishing this will require work on behalf of both the superintendent and the school committee. Our school committee is ultimately responsible for evaluating the work of the superintendent, and that work is currently in process. We believe in the importance of a fair evaluation and will discuss her annual evaluation as a committee at one of our regularly scheduled school committee meetings. There will be opportunities for the community to provide feedback as a part of the evaluation process. As a school committee, we are committed to centering the well-being of our city's children and the stability of our schools. Our community deserves the very best from all of us, and we look forward to working with all stakeholders in our community to move forward together. The statement is on behalf of the Northampton School Committee on today, June 26, 2024. Is there a motion? Move to approve.
Second.
Motion was made by member Foster Cannon, seconded by, I missed it, member Hennessy. Is that correct? By member Hennessy. Cassie, when you're ready, roll call, please.
Member Hennessy,
Yes.
member LaBounty,
Yes.
member Agna,
Yes.
member Davis,
Yes.
Mayor Shara,
Yes.
member Foster Cannon,
Yes.
member Seraphy Cox,
Yes.
member Stein,
Yes.
Great. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for that work. And we are moving on to the next item on the agenda, which is discussion and vote. So there's discussion and vote on the FY25 budget cost center allocations if amendments are approved by the City Council in July 2024. The City Council has a meeting scheduled for July 2nd. And so that total amount is $40,778,585. And then there's discussion and vote of the FY25 budget cost center allocations if amendments are not approved by the council in July. And that amount would be $39,673,835. And I don't know if I see Bobby. I think Bobby is a co-host, and Dr. Bonner. How would you like to proceed? Is Bobby
Okay.
going to go through what you
So-
sent us?
Yes, so Bobby is ready to take it from here. We're hoping that we don't have to go line by line, but that you have specific questions that you wanted to ask about the cost centers. And she also has provided a document of the request about aligning the actual grant funds to the line items. So I'm going to just turn it over to Bobby to take it from here.
Okay, hopefully everybody can hear me tonight. Yay, okay. So basically, I'm gonna leave it up to questions that you may have after having had time to review. I can certainly go through if you want me to. I do want to just say on the document that I sent earlier this morning for the grants, just to let you know how it reads. So if you're looking at that document, under the full budget, which is includes everything, the pertaining line items will pertain to each one of those numbers. So if you look at line 53 on the budget, that says full general fund budget, that will pertain to that 9,475. If you look to the right, under the cost center piece, that will pertain to this, the tab. So whether it's student services or, Bridge Street School or Jackson Street School. And that will give you that line number on that particular tab. So with that, and just to let you know too, there will be some changes in the grant funding as the grants are written and allocations to various schools, but it won't change in any large part the overall funding at all for grants.
Okay, I just want to stop. Was that clear to everyone? Is everyone following what Bobby was just saying about?
Can you say that again, Bobby? Just one more time. This is Aileen Davis. Can you just say what that statement again?
Yep. So right now, like the way I have the Title I funding, for instance, allocated out, that will change once the grant is written and the allocations per schools, that will actually shift between the schools a little bit. The actual allocation itself won't decrease, but it may shift between which school gets which. Did that help?
I think so. I saw a nod. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so I would now just leave it up to if anybody has any questions.
Okay. I see Member Agna.
So I have a couple questions. And I asked this knowing that there aren't funds for it, but I know that we have an obligation to do organic pesticides, or not pesticides, but organic treatment of our fields. I think our deadline is December. And I just wanted to know, if we can't afford to do that, what kind of recourse do we have? Is that something that we need to ask the city about, or maybe Mayor, you know more about that? And I have a second question too.
Well, I
Go
can
ahead, Bobby.
say we didn't budget any extra funds at this point. But, we could look to unallocated capital funds perhaps, but there's not a whole lot of that either. That's not planned for.
Mhm.
Did you say you had a second question, Member Agna?
Yeah, but I think Dr. Bonner might have an answer to this one. Is
Oh,
that-
okay.
yeah.
Oh, sure. Sorry, Dr. Bonner.
Okay, so I just wanted to point out that we have been partially trying to meet the ordinance in terms of addressing our fields. We do not use synthetic or chemical, so it is organic pesticides. So it was also about the treatment of the fields.
Right.
And so currently there is a practice that our groundskeepers are doing now that is working, is minimizing exposure to our students. And so I will be glad to present to the school committee what is being done and what continues to be being done. But there is a definite cost increase to fully go into being truly organic. And so I will share that. We have an ad hoc committee. We are on hold for our next meeting, waiting for the report from, I always get this company's name, Thai. Yes, so we have not received that report yet. And but I will present in terms of what has been occurring and what we continue to do to meet a portion of the ordinance that's at hand at our next meeting, which will be in August, I believe, unless there's something that comes sooner.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Bonner.
Mhm.
My second question is, well, I guess it's more a statement, trying to understand the needs of the whole district and being pretty clear in my concern about the school adjustment counselor at the high school and the teacher, the English teacher. And I don't know if at this point, other than saying that I'm still concerned about that, but I also appreciated Karen Hidalgo's email, which was very detailed in spelling out situations that possibly could be looked at the high school to rectify the situation around the teacher and the school adjustment counselor. And thank you, Ms. Hidalgo, for your email to us, all of us.
Okay, thanks. Okay. Moving on to Member Stein.
Thanks. I hadn't planned to talk about this, but given the conversation, I just want to remind our committee that it's not the city ordinance that is compelling us to be ready by December. It's the policy that was passed by the school committee to have this implemented by December 9th, 2024. So unless we change that policy, which I highly suggest we do not, and there's no money forthcoming, I don't want to hear any complaints about crabgrass in the spring, because frankly, grants were provided that weren't used, time was taken that was unnecessary, and the partial measures that we'll hear about do not meet the letter or the spirit of the policy. So I would like, and I mentioned this last time, a report from that ad hoc committee. We never even had a conversation about this outside report that was funded with reapportioned capital money by the city. I'm very frustrated with how this is all played out. It was all avoidable. And the fact that the district's not ready for this transition is frankly unacceptable. Question I had for Bobby is regarding the grants and revolving funds list. And it has to do with the chunk of school choice revolving figures. So we have a number of dollar figures, and we have school choice revolving with, associated FTEs. And I have sort of two questions about this. In the last line, that's 270, it says 290,743 school choice revolving with the 5.93 FTEs and ESPs. And then it also says special education tuition revolving. So is that 290 figure a combination of school choice revolving funds and some amount from the special education tuition revolving? That's one question. The second question about it is, without backing that out, if it is different, the total number I get to on the school choice revolving listed here is 1,216,950. And I'm wondering if we took in that much in school choice last year, like in order to pay for this, did we actually take in that amount of money from school choice?
We don't actually get the full figures until the end of June for what we do take in for school choice. But it should be right around that amount. Last I checked, and there is, if I back out that two positions under the special ed tuition revolving, that's somewhere around $60,000. It was a $30,000 and I think maybe a $34,000 position. So it was about $64,000 coming out of the special ed tuition revolving. We originally had only one out of that account, but the balance was enough that I felt comfortable that we could take the two positions. And so that was added as a remedy to try to keep any other positions that we could, in looking in every corner and every place that we could.
Great. And I just want to make one clarification for the public, and then I have a question for Dr. Bonner. The clarification is what we're discussing is the other part of the budget that is not the city appropriation, which includes Chapter 70, right? So this amount totals little over 4.8 million, and it's made up as Bobby said, of a number of grants and revolving funds. I'm pointing this out because this level of detail and this sort of other funding is where the sort of overspending of school choice was sort of happening that folks did not recognize were happening unsustainably. So I'm just pointing out for the public to understand the two sections of the budget. Our overall budget that we're voting on tonight is over $45 million as an operating budget. My question for Dr. Bonner is that at last Friday's meeting, I asked if you would give us a walkthrough of the reduction choices based on the 4 principles that you identified that were guiding the process, so we can understand how those principles played out in the choices. And I'm hoping that you will give us some additional clarity on how you weighed these options that we're now being asked to vote on tonight.
Sure, I'll be glad to do that, and it's nothing new. Let me just get my notes. Okay. So this process began with work with the principals and the directors. And so I've been very transparent, and I'm just going to remind people of the process of when it started. And so started with 4 principles, guiding principles to help us to make decisions based upon the budget. And the first initial budget that was done was based upon the school's needs, requests, and their goals for the upcoming year. And so principals were responsible for speaking to their with their educators, those who were in their buildings, in terms of their needs to actually create their budget. That was shared with everyone back in one of the subcommittee meetings, which was a representation of how these requests came to be in terms of where, once we had realized that we needed to make reductions, where we should choose from. And so there were conversations that took place with the administrators, and there were listings of where suggestions for cuts, and there were conversations around those cuts. The 4 guiding principles are: first, integrate current resources as part of coherent academic strategies. The second was to build capacity of staff rather than hiring new positions. The third was identify short-term infusions that can be phased out. And the fourth was catalyzing longer-term trade-offs to sustain shifts after ESSER supplement is gone. So right away, staff knew, the administrators knew, that any position that was attached to ESSER more than likely was going to be eliminated. There were some para positions that were in the ESSER funding that we did move over to operating budget, which was shared throughout this process. So those were the 4 guiding principles in helping us make decisions. And let me just share in terms of how administrators actually use this. So for instance, Leeds and Ryan Road talked about how they could share some of their resources. So one example is to share their library paraprofessional. That was one. Then we being the 4 principals, elementary principals, talked about the clerical staff. In fact, Leeds School actually did not have a second clerical staff and was actually asking for that to be restored. So we talked about how can we share our staff. And so we talked about our clerical positions to be split between 2 elementary schools. So that was one component. The middle school talked about how that they can look at their schedule in terms of what they can do to help save some positions. And there were some trade-offs between some positions at the middle school and the high school. The high school principal presented a list of suggestions to me, which was shared in that document when you asked for original documentations of what the principals shared. So there's nothing to look for. There's nothing else there that would exist that would say something different. And so conversations about the needs of the building. So we prioritize teaching staff. And I will say that Jackson Street, when we looked at the numbers of their students, we looked at the fact that there were 3 grades that had bubbles in them, and could they be combined? And so keeping within what is in our contract to try to keep at a maximum of 25 students, we said that that will be close to about 30. If it goes to 30, we would talk about splitting that class. Those were the kinds of conversations that we had. What we can live with, but you must understand, as I have said before, no one wanted to make recommendations to reduce staff. They wanted to maintain staff. And so the work was very challenging and very hard and caused a lot of division. And I'm sad to hear that that there's this belief that principals didn't make these recommendations when I have that actually in emails, or I have it in notes and discussions. And I purposely don't meet with people alone. I met with the business manager, and these conversations occurred. And so this is how it was discussed and how we determined what was going to be reduced. And I also want to point out too, in terms of the equity stance, each administrator for their building had to make recommendations based upon the needs of their students. They're the ones who know their students. They're the ones who know the needs of their building. And so the recommendations came from the principals.
Okay.
I just had one follow-up from that.
Okay.
It's brief. I was more specifically looking for, I know that principals make recommendations, you ultimately make the decision in consultation with them. I was more specifically looking to understand how the principals directly were used to decide certain trade-offs, right? So at every school, there were certain trade-offs. And I was trying to get some insight into why certain choices at some schools versus another, and how those principles guided those decisions. I understand the general process you outlined, but more specifically, I'll just pick what example. Let's see. So, and the amount of trade-offs that could have been made at the high school, how did those principles that were guiding the decision-making end up with the elimination of an English teacher and elimination of an adjustment counselor? What was the calculation about other areas of cuts versus those that made those the ones that had to be made? And that's sort of the level of clarity I'm looking for.
Okay,
because there are things about it that I'm not part of those discussions. I don't know I don't have the information you do, but we're being asked to vote on some hard cuts. So if we can understand the rationale, it makes it a lot easier.
Absolutely. So also, you need to know something that I will always recommend after having a conversation, because it's least impact on a human, is to look at attrition. So if I have someone who is retiring and that we still have people in those positions that can actually do that job, I'm going to make that recommendation. So for instance, we had the opportunity of an adjustment counselor who retired. So that position was eliminated based upon the fact that it was not going to impact any actual current employee, no bumping. It would have been an elimination. Very similar to what was done prior to me coming into district with that recommendation of the director for digital literacy. It was a time that the person was at the end of their contract. They were looking or seeking another position. So it was an opportunity to actually eliminate or reduce that position. So in terms of prioritizing, besides trying to maintain teaching staff, is that we look at who is going to retire, which causes a vacancy. It does help in terms of preventing bumping and affecting other employees and taking that position before we take a position with an actual live body in it. So those are the considerations in terms of why the adjustment counselor at the high school, because of attrition. The English teacher versus, and there was two academic teachers. Actually, there were several academic teachers that were recommended. And through this process, there was a request to, can we look at this instead of this? And so I did listen to our administrators, and we made those changes as we went through the budgetary process, and those changes were revealed to you. And so at first, remember that we were considering doing a reduction in a number of teachers at the high school. The theater teacher was a potential reduction. And then there was additional academic teachers to cut them or reduce them to 0.5. So the change was in, let's look at actual full-time positions rather than part-time positions, which is easier to fill. Most people don't want to stay for a part-time position. And so there was a request to make a switch in terms of who would be eliminated. Then it was up to the administrator to determine, when we were able to restore some of those positions, which position do you need most? And of course they need both, but there is a greater need for the math instructor to be reinstated. And so all this was a consideration. In the hindsight, that also we had to look at the fact that we needed to restore and balance the numbers of students at Jackson Street, particularly in their 4th and 5th grade that has a bubble. And so with the increase in allocation that we're hoping and waiting for City Council to approve next week, we're able to restore the Jackson Street, 2 Jackson Street teachers, not 3, but 2, because originally there was a cut for 3, and we're able to restore what is at the high school in terms of the request, which was the math instructor.
Okay. Thank you. Member Hennessy.
Okay, I think mine will be quick. I had the same question about school choice, so I won't repeat that about the 1.2, what was anticipated. I just want to, Dr. Bonner, I know all these cuts are horrible. Like I get it, and I really appreciate your advocacy about not, trying to save employees, and so not filling the adjustment counselor position because of attrition. However, I just worry, and I've said this before, and I know I'm being repetitive, I worry about how many students are impacted by that. And so, if we're able to find more money, I would really strongly advocate for the adjustment counselor, given, I work in a high school and I know the needs of our students. And that is, of all the cuts, I will tell you, that is the one that is the most concerning to me. So that's just my comment on that. And then my 2, I said you had another question about school choice. I got that question. I'm wondering 2 things, and you don't have to comment on now, but in the future or even now, have you considered increasing athletic fees? I know that's not palatable I pay a lot in athletic fees. If the athletic booster club is able to fund some of what you have on the $300,000 of athletics, and then is there a long-term, I would love for you to think in the long term, and you probably already are, about the fiscal viability of hiring a grant writer who would, of course, have to raise money for their own position, but would it be practical for us as a district to do that for long run? So that's it. I don't think you have to comment on any of my comments.
I'll be real quick. So prior to you coming back on the school committee, in the fall of last year, we just raised the fees, the athletic fees, for the coming year. So we did look at that, and then I agree about hiring a grants writer, and that's something that we could consider down the road. And yes, they could actually write in their salary within those grants. Yeah. But we would need seed money to start with that. And so, yes, I agree.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Okay, Member Davis.
Several of my questions were answered, and two things that, relatively speaking, I think seem like small potatoes, but I had questions about them. They were both on the district budget sheet. One of them was about advertising, and it said $7,000 for advertising, and the other one was about a substitute dispatcher, a little over $11,000. And I was wondering, is it advertising? Does that mean advertising like for positions that are openings, and it costs that much money really to post on School Spring or whatever, wherever it is? Yeah.
Yep, so yes, it is. That's advertising for actual positions that we put out there for the school portion. And I'm not sure, I think School Spring is a piece of it, but they also advertise, I think, in other places. So that is what that is for. And then the other question was the sub dispatcher. So we have somebody that handles before and after hours the substitute call-ins. So they get the folks who call out, they get, and then they have to look in and get the sub pool to replace that teaching.
So it's not, so can I just ask, so it's not an online service that Northampton uses?
No, it's one of our people
Huh.
that gets the extra stipend for doing that work before and after. It's actually our data.
Oh, it's somebody who's already employed with Northampton and gets this additional.
Correct.
Okay. That's okay. Thank you.
Mhm.
Member LaBounty.
And most of my questions were actually already answered as well. And I want to a double vote for that grant writer. That's one of my on my wish list because I think that would really benefit us. And I do also want to say that I completely understand the choice, and because I've had to do it myself in my work. If someone's retiring, you or leaving for other reasons, you choose that position, right? Because you know you're not affecting someone. But I also will express my concern about the students and just sort of wondering if we have a thought or a plan for what would happen, how that work is going to be needed and measured. And I also, thought a lot about Karen Hidalgo's email and different ideas and things. So I'm just wondering if we've thought about how that will measure out, and I'm certain the principal already has, but I guess that's my biggest worry, I think, right now.
So we do have a new principal who's coming in. And he's been following and watching, and I'm sure that, and he's actually has met with Bill Worley, the former principal. And then just some concerns about some of the suggestions that were made in terms of some other places that we can cut. So I know that there was a mention of our gateway and our dual enrollment program. And so there's currently about 134 students who are signed up for those programs. And it's an opportunity for students who may not meet the criteria for Smith College to take college classes. And the thing is that although people may say that that's not student facing, it's servicing 134 students, and these students are very, very diverse. There's a lot who are on 504s. There's a lot who are on IEPs. There's a high population of students of color and free and reduced lunch. So it's meeting the needs of another population that would not basically have the similar or same opportunity. So for me, that was an equity issue that I would not actually look at that program. But if there are other suggestions, I've heard some suggestions, but there is a rationale why I may pause. But I do hear, your concern about meeting the needs of our students. And the adjustment counselor who is not being replaced would actually meet with our general ed body and are not assigned students who may have an IEP or a 504. So there is conversation in terms of how those needs will be met. And that will be a part of our summer work and our management in terms of what we need to do moving forward.
Okay, all set. Member Seraphy Cox.
Thank you. A couple of questions. One is the business office contract services. It's line 30. There was $0 for this in FY23. And this line item started last year. Can you tell me what that is? Bobby, you're muted.
Muted, Bobby.
Okay, is that on the line 23? You said on the full?
Line 30.
Line 30.
On the full.
Okay. That was something that was in the FY23 and the FY24 and continued in the FY25 budget. So if you look at column G, H, and J, you'll see one of those had that budgeted amount of 4,000.
No, at least the one that I'm looking at that you sent today has a 0 in column F. Oh, that's actual expended. Okay, I'm sorry. So yes, it was in the approved budget. You're right. I'm sorry, but it was not expended. So yeah, so can you tell me what it's for and why we think we're going to expend it this next year if we didn't before?
Yeah, I mean, it could be for any reason. So for instance, like say we had a postage machine that was down or something that we would need to get service on that. Or we needed somebody to come in to look at one of our computers, other than computers, probably not a good example because IT would handle that for the most part. But anything like that. So if maybe we needed some extra services that we had to contract out for, that's where we would fall to for that.
I see. Okay.
And I mean, I get the history, but I don't have that available here.
No worries. I can also, now that I realized that I was looking at the wrong column, I can also look back at your most recent budget report to see if it was expended at all this year.
Yeah.
So I said in the last meeting, and I'll say it again here, that considering the type of cuts that we're looking at, I would be comfortable with letting go the digital literacy coordinator position. As you know, Dr. Bonner talked about, it's been let go before. So, and I think there are some positions that are more important than that one on our list. I had made a suggestion back in January for a reduction in the number of clerks in the business office. And Bobby, I know that in our last meeting you said, I actually need more people, not fewer. Of course, the entire school system probably needs more people, not fewer. But as we're looking at the type of cuts that we're looking at, I do think that that 3 clerks plus yourself, it's especially as we're hopefully going, in a direction of not so much paper and more automation, that sort of thing. So those are some trade-offs that I see. And I have some kind of specific ideas of positions that I would like to see restored. But I also have some questions around the water and sewer and the stormwater expenditures. So here's kind of what I'm thinking. It looks like what's happening is that a city department is paying another city department for services within the city on city property, right? Because schools are city property. And I mean, total, this is somewhere around $100,000 each year that we're paying for stormwater and water and sewer. And like, you know, me paying the city for stormwater and water and sewer, that makes sense. Within the city itself, you know, that I guess I'm wondering, for one thing, the money for that, I assume, goes into the enterprise accounts for those departments, rather than necessarily operational, but obviously operational gets paid, you know, those departments get paid differently. Yeah, so if maybe this is more of a question for the mayor, I don't know, Bobby, but if we can, is it possible for the city to look at that and say, okay, yeah, this is, you know, the left hand paying the right, as it were, on the same body. So that's my actual question here. And then I do have, I have a broader question too about the stabilization fund, but I'll pause here with that.
If I could start very quickly with the Director of Digital Literacy. So I expressed last time we met the importance of that particular position, especially since we are in the age of AI. And I hear your concerns, but I also want to remind you that that person is a non-rep contract. And so they actually have a 3-year contract. So they'll be in their second year starting in the fall. So if that position was to be eliminated, you're talking about, we would have to see in terms of how that contract would be rectified. And I was trying to pull that language while you were talking, so I apologize for that.
Yeah, no worries.
All right.
So, so you're saying, yeah, so one thing to look at, are you saying that you're going to look in that contract to see if there's like a reduction in force clause or something like that?
Yes,
Okay,
because it was a
got it.
district model contract that we used. However, and that's a vote for the school committee, but I am not really recommending that. I know that we're looking at the now, but I hope that we are also future focused too, in terms of preparing our kids for the changes that are coming in the area of technology, and what services this position has provided to the school. So it's not just, I know that you're looking for student-facing positions, but I would ask that you would reconsider that. The second piece is too, there's something that we as superintendents always plan for in terms of succession planning. And so I know, whether it's been announced or not, that there are positions in the business office that soon will be retiring. And so we just finished hiring a lot of new people, and there was very little history in terms of those positions, and having to start from scratch and finding those things. And so we have been preparing and grooming a person. We know that Bobby said she came in here knowing that, you know, she's going to give us a couple of years. She will be retiring. We will also probably be looking at retirement of our assistant business manager. And so we have been grooming people to be able to step up in that role. And so I would be very concerned for us to eliminate a position in that office, knowing that down the road, we can then look at the restructuring, but we are actually training someone to be ready, to be the continued history to lead the district. And so I would hope that you all would also consider that as opposed to taking a position. And this was also something that was recommended earlier, and it was shared that, you know, we do look at succession planning. So looking at the future, not just looking at the now, and that's very, very important. Okay. And I'll turn it over to Bobby for the other questions. I don't know about the sewer and the water piece.
No worries. And I appreciate that context, Dr. Bonner, that, you know, when I had brought up about the business office before, that's just, it's clarifying. Thank you. It makes it a harder decision. I'm not exactly sure where I fall on it, but thank you for that context.
Okay, and as far as the water and sewer goes, I really, the only comment I have is that we have many shared costs that we do share with the city. And I think if they had to take on the brunt of all these costs, you know, we'd be looking at a whole different story of how they could fund the school budget. So that, I don't know if that really answers your question, but I mean, that's something we have to take into consideration. There's a lot of services that we use at the city that we don't actually pay a portion of, but they do help us out sometimes on a daily basis, such as, let's say, the procurement officer. We do pay a portion of some of the IT people, but, you know, is that really equitable? I don't know. There's just so many intermingling services that we get. You know, I think the school might lose if we started to look at, you know, just how much there is. Now, I don't know if the mayor would like to add to that, but that would be my answer to your concern there.
Yeah, I mean, I hear that. I'm sorry, Mayor. I hear that. I think I was specifically looking at these two line items, not those other, because they are in a completely separate budget from the general fund of the city, is my understanding, and I could be wrong about that.
So you're correct that this goes into the enterprises, but this is actually by ordinance that every parcel in the city must contribute to that by ordinance. So whether it's, you know, building I'm sitting in right now, or school buildings, or someone's personal property, the ordinance states that it's every parcel, whether there's a building on it or not, contributes into that, into those enterprise funds.
Okay, so that, and so are you saying that other city departments contribute for their buildings?
Every parcel in the city. Smith Voc, same thing. Smith Voc often asks about this as well.
Good. Okay, and I think I'm gonna percolate on that for a little bit, and I'll come back for a second bite of the apple.
Okay. Just to note, so we have a, there's a hard stop at 7 for this meeting, so it's 6:46 right now. So I'm gonna go to Member Stein, but let's everyone remember we have about less than 15 minutes to wrap up this meeting. Otherwise I believe we'll lose a quorum. Okay, Member Stein.
Thanks. Yeah, if we're gonna lose the quorum too, I'd suggest we reschedule another meeting because there's just so much to talk about here, of consequence. I had a couple of questions for Bobby, but before I pose those, I'll just say that I'm really concerned looking at some of these reductions about the impact on our kids and on our staff. I know we've talked about this throughout the past few months, but these are significant. I mean, in particular, I'm worried about the reduction of the interventionist at Bridge Street, the reduction of the first grade paraprofessional. I'm worried about math interventionist reduction at Leeds. I'm worried about the library para at Jackson Street. I'm worried about Ryan Road, what was shared with us in public comment recently about the IEP grids not actually capturing a lot of the ADL minutes and whether or not we're going to be able to meet student needs. I'm very worried about losing an English teacher at the high school and what that's going to do to our students' access to education. I'm profoundly worried about the adjustment counselor loss. Worried about, the math interventionist loss at JFK, and on and on. I think these are going to have really significant impacts, and they're going to not only cost us financially, but they're also going to cost us in terms of what we've lost and what our kids will lose. So I'm really worried about it. The questions I have, so if I'm reading this correctly, it appears that we spent 77,000 in FY23 in unemployment, and we're budgeting 25,000 for FY25. And with these reductions, I'm wondering basically how we arrived at that figure. A more complicated question I have is around disproportionality. So last year, one of the large conversations that we had during the budget was the sort of the fact that we had a disproportionality in certain segments of our student population achieving things that needed to be corrected and was required to be corrected by the state. So I'm wondering if we've made those corrections, and if not, are we still making those required to make those disproportionate spends, and if so, where they are? And the last question is about the Medicaid line. I think it's line 615 in the all budget. It's, if I'm reading it correctly, it shows that we had 38,000 and change in billing last year that was part of the budget, and now it's zeroed out. I'm not clear on what that Medicaid was versus what Medicaid services are billed and go directly back to the city. So any insight on that would be really appreciated.
So I can start.
Oh,
Yeah, you go
sorry,
ahead
but-
and start, and let me
but-
address the disproportionality component, because that's actually academic and that deals with discipline and our special education population.
And I just want to put one more last question on that I forgot, which I raised earlier in the process, which was around the net metering and the electricity. So we're budgeting $250,000 in net metering charges for the district. I have been curious about what we were getting in terms of net metering credits for the two arrays that are on Bridge Street and Ryan Road, and also how the distribution of credits was happening for the solar array that the city bought into in the Berkshires. Are we getting any of those credits applied to our bill in the net metering amount? Like what's the actual sort of breakdown of that? Thanks.
Okay, did you want me to go first, Dr. Bonner? Yeah, okay. So for the unemployment, just so you know, we actually pay case by case. So that is kind of hard to, budget for, but, it's our hopes that maybe some people will get other employment. If not, we'll have to make up a difference there. That is, and I'm looking to see, you said unemployment. I was just looking to see what you said we spent in 23, which we spent 77 in 23. I don't think we're near that this coming year. I can check on that, but that's the case for that, and also the case that we didn't have any additional money to fund some of these lines. We really, more than just that unemployment line, we need to fund other lines too, but we just have not been, able to. We need to start catching up, and we will get there. As far as the Medicaid goes, what that line was is when I came here, the school district in FY23 was paying the Medicaid billing invoice. I talked with our finance director, city finance director, Nardi, and what happens with the Medicaid money, which has actually changed as well since the inception of the Special Ed Stabilization Fund, but the Medicaid money came directly to the city, but we were paying the bill. the invoice for it. So I had talked to her and she agreed to pay that bill directly from the city side because they were actually receiving the revenue. So that's why you see that line look like that. Now that revenue, they're actually the city, if you recall from the presentations, the city is now giving us all of that Medicaid income or revenue, and that will be going into that stabilization fund to refill that fund as we go. And then onto the net metering, that is a department I had checked in with, and I can't recall her name at the time. She had said to leave everything the same there. There are some reports that they have put out, and we can certainly share those out. I'd have to get them from our new person that's heading that up. So I know that doesn't really answer your question, but I don't have enough information in front of me at this point to do that.
Thank you.
Very briefly, because I see Member Davis has her hand up with a question. So in terms of disproportionality, we are addressing those concerns that have been pointed out to us by the state. We are also waiting for our tiered focus monitoring report. We had a verbal exiting interview in terms of some of the highlights and some of the things to watch out for, but we are waiting for the actual written report. And when that comes, I will be glad to share that with you all. But in terms of disproportionality, in terms of discipline, so I know that we're focusing on what we're reducing, but we are maintaining a high quality of support staff in each of the buildings. So remember that in terms of dealing with discipline, we have tiered support specialists that we did restore in the midst of this budget process that has occurred. We still have our BCBAs who handle behavioral plans and so on and do other things. There's still our school psychologists and our adjustment counselors. So those portions are still in our buildings to help us address certain behaviors within our buildings, to help us address discipline. And so to help us to address the over identification of students of color in special education programming, as well as in disciplining. The other population that we are concerned about are multilingual students, and we are also working on them. So in terms of making sure that they are accessing the curriculum, and so that work is still being done. You won't see reductions in those areas.
Great. Mayor Sierra, I have one more question for you. I'd briefly say, what we're hearing from the educators by and large is that they don't feel that the programs are currently robust, and that what we're maintaining, they would not describe as robust. Or maybe a disagreement there. But my question really for the mayor is, what is our new floor that the budget next year will be calculated on? Is it the 39 million and change? Like, I'm trying to understand as we go forward, what is the new floor that you want to calculate the 3% increase on for next year?
So as long as the override passes and then those additional funds can be built into the base, then it would be on that final 40 million. I don't have it directly in front of me, but the larger number would be the base. That's the whole point, is that to make this recurring so that these are sustainable funds that we can then build an increase on every year.
So the 40 million, like 877, whatever, that number would be the new base, assuming that the additional funds are added and then the override passes. So then it would be that with a 3% increase for next year.
Right, the 40,778,585.
Okay, so basically what we're passing this year plus 3%.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
If we can recur that revenue, yes. Member Davis.
Yes, this is a process question about, since it's 6:57. And so I want to know what happens if in the next 3 minutes we don't, because we have to vote on this, right? or no? It was just a discussion, or this was
This is a vote.
that's what I thought. So, there was a comment made about schedule another meeting. Some people may be gone, like quorum wise, time wise, city council wise, like, so teachers can be notified, or maybe that doesn't count on us, that piece of it. Maybe that's, and now it's 6:58 because I just rambled. So I wanted to know what happens if we don't do something in the next 2 minutes. Maybe somebody knows.
Dr. Bonner,
Well,
I don't.
We passed the bottom line budget last time, so Dr. Bonner can still move forward. It's
The
really an
details.
issue of slips, right, Dr. Bonner?
Big deal. Yeah.
Correct. And so right now we are in a holding pattern until city council makes that final vote. And the reason being is that if we call people back and the vote changes to a lesser number, or it defaults into the 5%, which is going to happen July 1st for us, we would be at a loss of actually having to rip those people again. So I don't want to go back and forth. We've already caused enough angst to our staff members. And so right now we are in a holding pattern. We know who we want to call back. We probably will have those letters ready to go, hopefully after July 2nd. And of course, it's a vacation. Next week is a holiday, so it's going to be really, really difficult. So those letters might not get out right away, but they'll be ready to go out when staff can get those out. But we're in a holding pattern. We can't move forward without the city council finalizing that vote. And last time we met, you did as a body vote on you actually voted on both pieces, so I can move forward with that. And it's just, again, you can always come back and talk about the details after that, but at least we have a working budget and we can call people back. Now if you make switches on that, then we'll just have to deal with it as it comes.
Thank you. Okay, Member Foster Cannon.
I just want to make sure I'm understanding correctly because it's 7 o'clock and I want the schools to be able to do their planning. So I was going to move approval of what we've got, even though recognizing I share the same concerns we've heard everybody articulate. We're facing some very, very painful choices. So it's my desire is to allow the schools to plan, not because I feel good about what's happening. Like I just want to be really clear on that. But Dr. Bonner, are you saying you do not need us to vote tonight in order to move forward with planning, or did I understand that correctly?
Well, the last time we met, you actually did vote on the potential of an 8% budget. That was a motion that was made by the school committee body and voted on. So this, in essence, what we're reviewing tonight is the 8% budget. So it's the bottom line. So if you so choose not to vote on the actual line items, because that's what we're going through right now, that's another conversation. But it would really help us if you did vote tonight so that we know what employees we're actually going to have and who we're not. And then we need to inform, if you're making switches, I need to inform those people.
Okay. So I would move approval, as I said, not because I want to cut off discussion or because I understand we're making terrible choices, but to allow the schools to move forward to plan, and in recognition of how much work has gone in between the leadership team and the superintendent, going back and forth with all of these numbers. So that's why I'm making that motion.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, motion's made by Member Foster Cannon, seconded by Member Davis. Member Seraphy Cox.
Yeah, excuse me. I think that okay, how do I put this? I guess I will just put out an amendment, and that vote can happen. And it will happen without a ton of thinking, right? Because we're at crunch time, and that is not my best thinking. So honestly, I feel like actually that is why I would prefer not to vote tonight, because I have a list of like 400 some $1,000 worth of positions that we've heard from community members, from caregivers, from students, from teachers are necessary positions. The positions that I'm talking about include the adjustment counselor, the English teacher at the high school, the academic interventionist at Leeds, math interventionist at Leeds, and then 2 other math interventionists. I think, actually, I don't know if that's a math interventionist. I think it is. So I think it's 3 math interventionists, and considering, like it's something at every school basically, and $466,000 is not a small amount. It's also not the millions of dollars that we were talking about before. And I've been working on trying to find places to switch. As I said before, one of those places I do think is the digital literacy coordinator. And I hear you, Dr. Bonner, on that, but I still do think it's that. The business office clerk, I hear you about the succession planning and so forth. Maybe it's, reducing to a part-time position or something like that, as somebody goes into retirement. I don't know. Obviously, I don't want to make a decision that would hurt somebody's retirement. However, we're also talking about, thousands of kids in our district. I really would like for the city to think about like I understand that we have to pay water and sewer and stormwater, but are we paying the same rates as businesses? Are we paying the same rates as residential? Are we paying cost, or like where is the rate that we're paying set in, like, is that set in ordinance, or does it just say that we need to pay into it? So for me, there's a lot of questions around what we can move around in order to potentially restore some of these positions. So I would prefer not to vote tonight. Dr. Bonner has what she needs in terms of being able to start paying bills and doing the recalls of the positions up to the bottom line of 40,778,585. We already voted on that part. The question is about the line items. And if we vote yes on Member Foster's motion, then in a sense, we're solidifying the cuts that I just outlined are cuts that I would like for us to figure out how to avoid if possible. And I have more, as I said, I have more ideas and thoughts about how potentially to make that happen. So I don't want to make an amendment. I just would like to not vote tonight. And I'm wondering, Member Foster Cannon, if you would consider withdrawing your motion, just so we can end the meeting now, come back after the city council has voted, and we know for certain the amount of money that we're working with, and we can potentially look at rejiggering in order to restore.
I hear your concern and your question. I think, through budget and property, we've really looked at it, and there's lots of opportunity for discussion. I am A-okay if it does not pass, if the motion doesn't pass. I understand that if people have hesitation, but I'd like to keep it on the floor.
Okay, Member Hennessy.
Can someone just, I'm sorry if this sounds ridiculous. Can someone just explain to me what we're voting on? Like, we voted on the two numbers, so Dr. Bonner could go forward. What are we voting or potentially not voting on now? Or what would be the impact of it, I guess?
So I think Member Seraphy Cox sort of said it well. So we voted previously on the bottom line numbers, and then this would be sort of solidifying the cost centers as presented by Bobby in the
Okay.
document she provided.
Great. Great.
Yeah, so I'll just say that I will vote no because I don't want to solidify these cuts. And I think there are still more possibilities to avoid some of them.
Okay. Member LaBounty, then Member Stein.
Just a quick question. So I guess by voting yes, does it not allow the superintendent to make different decisions after? If they come upon, their new principal comes in and they decide, oh, this isn't working, does it not allow for that flexibility because we voted this? I guess I'm just wondering what that means.
It's a good question. Dr. Bonner, you still would have under your authority to be able to make changes?
Yes, but I would come back to the body to let them know why, and would hope that you would agree with the rationale of why the changes are being made, especially if it's coming from an administrator who's requesting a change in their building. We do have someone new at the high school, so we have to consider that. That's incredibly important. We have a new director of student services coming in. So just some thoughts there.
Okay. Member Stein.
Yeah, I was just going to sort of add that really the only constraints are particular labor contracts or lack of, or negotiated collective bargaining agreements. So in the past, we've had folks come and say we need to add another reading intervention to the high school mid-year, and we vote on that. So it would be a similar process, or other reductions, and then whatever flows from that. So we're not constrained in that way, but what we are saying is, if we vote yes on this motion tonight, we're saying we agree that these are the best choices for how to deploy the top line number we've received, the best benefit for all of our students and all of our staff. And I agree with Member Seraphy Cox that I think we can do better, and I think we can make some really specific choices that could address some of the positions that we've heard a lot about from the community and from staff members. And I would like the time to do that. I think we owe it to our students and we owe it to our staff.
Any further discussion? So Member Foster Cannon, you said you'd like to put it to a vote, correct?
Well, yeah, and with the reasoning, I think we need to do our jobs and we need to make decisions and let those go ahead. And I understand that changes can be made, and some of this work is conversation, some of it's public meeting, but I just feel as a school committee, we owe it to the district to let this work move forward. And yes, it's saying, okay, we're agreeing that this is the best use of the resources with the information we have at this time. And as information changes, those changes can come back to us. So that's why. That was a long answer to a yes or no question.
Okay. So if there's no further discussion, then, we will have to do a roll call for ourselves because Cassie has had to step away. Member Seraphy Cox, you go while I.
Sure. I just would offer a friendly amendment to Member Foster Cannon's motion that we put an agenda item on our next meeting to revisit the budget you know, to look at potential like to revisit the cost centers to see if we can I'm trying to think of like what the kind of official language would be, but basically to see if we can make restorations.
Move approval with a plan to revisit at a future meeting? Is that
At the next meeting,
at the next meeting?
at the July meeting.
We wouldn't meet until August. Am I correct?
I was thinking it was August that we skipped, not July. You're right. I guess the August meeting then.
Sorry, was that, I'm trying to find like letterhead to use for roll call. Oddly hard.
But amendment accepted if I didn't say that clearly.
I can do it. Give me a second.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry, what did you say, Member Foster Cannon?
Oh, I said friendly amendment accepted. I wasn't sure if I'd said that clearly.
Okay,
Okay.
so
Ready?
can we, so could you, Member Foster Cannon, sorry, could you reiterate the motion with the friendly amendment accepted?
Yes, move approval of the budget as presented tonight with a plan to revisit the cost centers at our next meeting.
Okay,
Can I speak before the vote?
yes,
So, I mean, I appreciate Member Foster Cannon accepting the motion, the amendment that Member Sarah P. Cox offered. But that's a much more chaotic way for us to move forward. For us to set a certain course of events in motion for a limited amount of staff right now to then possibly undo in August when we've let other people go is worse than us spending more time now to do that work. And I do think it's our job to do the best we can and save as many positions as we can and exercise our judgment based on all the available facts and all the available information we've gotten from many stakeholders in this process. And I hope this vote fails and that we can continue to do that work either tonight or in a meeting soon thereafter.
okay. Thank you. I would agree that I don't think we should continue this to August. I think this has to be dealt with sooner. All right, if there's no further discussion, then Dr. Bonner, could you do a roll call, please?
Yes. Okay. Member LaBounty,
Yes.
Member Hennessy,
Yes.
Member Stein,
No.
Member Seraphy Cox,
No.
Member Foster Cannon,
Yes.
Member Davis,
Yes.
Member Agna,
Oh, hold
She's
on.
got a thumbs up.
oh, I'm sorry, I had to look up. Thumbs up.
Yeah.
And Member Mayor Shear.
No.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 yays, 3 noes. Okay.
Okay. Now there's another vote on the agenda. Do you need us to take that vote?
Oh,
Lost the agenda now. There's a second vote. This would be for the lesser amount.
We didn't get information for this.
We don't have that.
Okay. Okay, so
Yep.
we will not be voting on that.
we would have to reconstruct that entire budget. There's
Okay.
just sufficient time to do that.
Just want to make sure we addressed everything on the agenda. Okay. Sorry, Member Davis, did you have something?
I have a quick question. I've gotten an email that sent to, I think maybe everybody, but I'm not sure, saying that the letter that we were referring to in the new form is not, they can't see it or something. Is there a way, do we make that? Trying to see how it's.
I don't know what,
The
What
draft
letter
letters
in-
are- It says your draft letters are linked in the agenda but not accessible. Could you please email the drafts or change the access? So do I just,
No.
those were in executive session.
Session.
that's what I thought, but I just wanted to, okay.
But the
The
statement.
final was what was read.
The
So,
final was what was read, and we will get that on letterhead in the morning and post it. Did we decide, are we gonna put it on the website? Is that? Do we have any decision?
I think we finally said where it's gonna be.
Okay,
That would make sense to me.
okay, we'll see where we can post it, and I'll make sure that member Agna has it for the press. Okay. If there's no further discussion, is there a motion to adjourn?
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second?
Motion is made by member Davis, seconded by member Foster Cannon, I believe. Sorry, Dr. Bronner. I'll go.
Yes, yeah, that's me.
Okay, so I got you. So roll call, ready?
Yes,
Okay, member, Mayor Shiera,
yes.
member Agna,
I believe she may have already had to leave.
all right, member Davis,
Yes.
member Foster Cannon,
Yes.
member Seraphy Cox,
Yes.
member Stein, member Stein,
Sorry, trouble unmuting. Yes.
okay, member Hennessy,
Yes.
and member LaBounty.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, everybody. Appreciate it. Thanks.
The recording has stopped.